you. At this time, we would ask all the commissioners to please introduce themselves, starting with my far left.
Kurt Timmerman, alternate.
Daryl Pratt, regular member.
Gary Getz, chairman.
Vishendra Kumar, Vice Chairman.
Phoebe Holmes, regular member.
Mike Lucia, alternate.
Gwen Arment, alternate.
Ms. Arment, I believe it's your turn to sit in for Mr. Kane, who is absent this evening. I believe he's celebrating 43 years of marital bliss.
Whoa,
Wow.
well, there you go.
Congratulations.
So he has our congratulations for that.
And awe.
Yeah, and awe especially.
Yeah, that number there.
So our next item up on the agenda is number 2, continued public hearings. There are none at this time. As well for number 3, public hearings, there are none. So item number 4 is review the minutes of our previous meeting of June 22nd, 2023. Does any one of the commissioners have any comments or questions about the minutes?
I know Mr. Kane had a correction. I don't remember what it was.
Do we bring that up now?
Yeah, if I may, I'm aware of that too. I think he had sent out an email that, I think it was on item number 8A, that appeared to be a unanimous vote, but he wanted to abstain from that. And I don't know what the best course might be to maybe table it so that when he's here, he can make that in person. Does anyone have any thoughts about that? That would resolve it.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
All right, this time the chair would entertain a motion to please table the confirmation of our minutes from June 22nd, 2023. Do we have a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to accept minutes.
We're gonna table them? We're gonna not vote
Why
on
did
them
he,
at
I,
this time.
I couldn't actually hear, what
Oh,
did you say,
okay.
Kurt? I couldn't hear it.
Oh, that Andy had sent an email about a correction, but we wanted
Oh,
to
he
defer
did.
it to the
Okay.
actual meeting.
Okay.
Because he's not here tonight, he can't make that
That's fine.
himself.
Yep.
So, if I may, just to restate, I think Mr. Comer meant to say he's making a motion to table the approval of the minutes until our next meeting, which will be on August 24th, 2023. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Mr. Pratt has seconded that motion. Is there any discussion about the motion? Hearing no discussion, we'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any of those opposed by nay? Are there any abstentions? Hearing none, that motion carries. Thank you. Next up, item number 5, enforcement. We typically would have the zoning enforcement officer's report. However, Mr. Lally is not here this evening, so we will be tabling that until our next meeting on August 24th as well. Item number 6, review of correspondence. Likewise, there is no correspondence at this time to review. Next item is number 7, old business. A is an alpha, we have a draft regulation change regarding cannabis sales and distributions. I believe at this time everyone's been given that draft copy. And if any commissioners have any comments or want to make a discussion, but I would only mention that we still need to set a public hearing and we still have to have an application before we can do that. But if anyone still wants to comment on what they've seen so far, please feel free to do so.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
Um,
Mr. Timmerman.
I think it looks fine. It just needs to be, when we put it into an application, we'll have to reorganize it.
Kind of reformat it a little bit?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
That's it.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. I
Yes.
do not have a copy of that.
Oh, okay.
Actually, the only reason I have a copy is I printed it out from the agenda
Same.
Oh, okay.
online.
It wasn't in the packet.
Yeah, it
Don't
wasn't
know
in the
why.
packet, but it's on that hyperlink on the online one, but we can certainly get that to you.
Yeah, why wasn't it included in the packet?
Maybe it came in later.
It may have been an oversight.
Oh, okay.
It's probably Fran Lolly's fault, he's not here. so.
You gave us one, guy.
Thank you.
They go to the Monday meeting.
Any other discussion at this time regarding that, or we'll continue to
So
monitor?
Who wrote this? Andy
Yes,
exclusively?
Andy worked on it with some assistance from Mr. Timmerman, I believe, regarding the format, and a lot of it is taken from another town's ordinance, so it's pretty similar.
Yeah, if it was town of Ridgefield, it's almost identical, other than that was an ordinance to be voted on. This, obviously has to be rewritten because it's written as an ordinance and it's not organized into what's allowed and what's prohibited, you know, because we're permissive, so it's not written that way. As for like the contents of it, I don't know, we should discuss certain things, like, there's no, like, everything is allowed according to this, you know, commercial micro cultivation, but you can do almost anything according to this except retail sales. So I'm not sure what the point is. I mean, Danbury next door is selling it, so it's not like it won't be available in town. You can get it delivered to you now anywhere in the state legally. So it's not as if preventing or prohibiting the one retail store that we'd be allowed is going to have a huge impact on. The goal is to stop people from using cannabis. It's not, and so I wonder why not just make it legal? Because there's parts of Danbury where they're going to open the second one that are closer to my house than other parts of Brookfield. It's, you know, there's no barrier. So, you know, I don't see why not to consider allowing one. You can certainly pick the place. You can restrict it obviously to one in a certain zone, and then get that potential tax revenue that we're always hearing that we're lacking. So, that's my thought.
Thank you, Mr. Lucia. Anyone else have any comments at this time? And again, we will be discussing this going forward probably quite a bit.
I just want to thank you for your
Ms.
comments.
Holmes?
I agree with them, and I definitely think we need to discuss putting in at least one retail store in Brookfield for the tax revenue.
Well, also, you haven't had a chance to see that, right, because you haven't gotten it yet. So maybe if you can look at it, you can make recommended changes to the whole.
I have
Oh,
it.
we read, yeah.
Oh, you
We
have
read
it?
it,
online.
we've got it,
Oh,
it's
okay. Yeah, yeah.
online, so, and I printed it.
I'm sorry, that was Gwen that said she
I'm
didn't get it.
sorry, I haven't.
All right.
So yes, I feel like this needs to be revisited as a group, or perhaps like, I don't know, have a bipartisan subcommittee writing these regs. When is the public hearing for this?
As I stated earlier, we still have to get an application before we can set a public hearing, so we're
Okay.
still at the very early stages.
Okay.
Yeah. It needs formatted to go into our regs. As Mr. Lucia said, you know, if it's written from a ordinance, some of the things don't apply, so I guess as we go through and subcommittee or however.
And good point, that's why it's a draft, but it's a starting point, right?
Yeah.
So, everyone's feedback is certainly valid, and we got our work cut out for us, but we've started relatively early, right? Because we extended the moratorium for a year, but we didn't want to wait till
Right,
the
we
end of the
wanted-
year
Yeah.
to
we
start
wanted-
working on it, so.
Yeah, we definitely
Sorry
wanted to
about that.
have it in midway through, so.
All right, thank you, everyone. Under item number 8, new business, we have A, 113 Silver Mine Road, Lot 4, number Z-23-39, Nicholas Yushak for CCA LLC, 40 Old New Milford Road, Brookfield, Connecticut, for Silver Mine Building 3 LLC, P.O. Box 1157, Danbury, Connecticut. Proposed 21,102 square foot, single-story warehouse building, loading dock, minor grading and drainage, restriping of existing handicap parking spaces, and landscaping. Is the applicant here?
Yes.
Could you please state your name and address for the record?
I'm Steve Sullivan, professional engineer, registered in the state of Connecticut, and vice president of CCA, with the applicant's engineer and surveyor on this property.
So you're here for the applicant?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Please proceed.
So this is a site plan approval application. It's an as-of-right use in the zone C. So 113 Silver Mine Road. It's 5.66 acres in the I-1 zone. It's a rear lot off of Silver Mine Road. To the east is the Still River and the State of Connecticut Highway. Federal Road is on the bottom page to the west. So this was a site that was actually approved over 20 years ago. And when they got that approved, they built all the infrastructure for, at that time, it was gonna be an office building. So there's 91 parking spaces on the site. So they brought in all the sewer, water, all the infrastructure there, drainage. The only thing that's missing is the building. So they finally got interest recently for warehousing. So we're looking to put in a 21,000 square foot warehouse. You need very little parking for warehousing, but the parking parking's already there. We're just gonna restrike the handicap spaces because they've changed dimensionally since 20 years ago.
I'm sorry, could you say that again? They changed what?
Dimensionally,
Oh, okay, the size?
yeah.
Thank you.
So this is the proposed building. This would be the loading area and the refuse area. This is the area that we're proposing to restrike the existing handicap. We have sidewalks along the front and the side, and the fire marshal asked for a sidewalk, connecting sidewalk, adjacent to the, or next to the exit doors on both sides of the building. And those connecting to the existing proposed sidewalks in the front. And so we are in the aquifer protection zone, but warehousing is not a prohibited use in the aquifer protection zone. We're also on a public water system. This water system is the Silver Line Water Company that serves all of the industrial buildings as part of the Silver Mine Industrial Park, which is this area is known as. So this is the last lot in that industrial park to be built on. We have received wetlands approval for the building. This is just a grading and drainage plan. As I said earlier, the drainage is already installed. There's galleries to the east and south of the building that were installed years ago. And utility-wise, again, sewer and water is already brought up to the site, up to the building. We will have to just go through for another connection permit with the WPCA prior to this type of building permit. Erosion controls are your standard. We have double row silt fence around the backside and the downgrading portion of the building. Catch basin silt sacks. From a landscaping perspective, this hatch area is existing woods and will remain as wooded areas. We're adding some shade trees in the existing parking area, and obviously some foundation plantings along the north and west side of the building. We also had a new photometric analysis done. So there are existing lights out there, but the regulations have changed over 20 years, so we had a new analysis done. We're replacing the lights there's 3 existing lights, and we're adding lights along the parking area. In your package, there's some cut sheets on the proposed lights. They won't be taller than 18 feet. They're a Guardco, 18-foot tall, contemporary light, dark sky. There's, like I said, there's cut sheets in the package. The architecture. The architect is not here, but it's a pretty straightforward building. We gave a sample floor plan in the package, which obviously is just a big open area right now. Until the actual tenant is selected. Like I said, there's a loading area, refuse area. There's a door on the north side. The main entrance is on the north side. This is the west side. And there's just an exit door on the south and east side. H&R Design was Dan Berry was the architect So this just shows, doors and windows, there'll be concrete panels. It'll, color-wise, it'll be, comparable to the existing, industrial park buildings there. I assume everyone's familiar with those buildings, where Bridgewater Chocolate is, and, so it'll be, earth tone colors, comparable to those, other buildings. So I think that really summarizes what they're trying to do. So I can answer any questions.
Did you
Yes.
have, excuse me, did you have anything else you wanted to summarize before we launch into that? Just to give you one last chance to do that.
Yeah, no, the only comment I got was from the fire marshal about the sidewalks, and I showed him how a truck would maneuver in the site, and he was fine with that. Other than that, I haven't.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you. Any commissioners have any questions for this gentleman?
Yes, I do.
Ms. Arnett,
Mr. Chairman,
please.
thank you.
Welcome.
I'm having a little trouble deciphering. I went there to look. And is it right as you're driving down that driveway, if you go straight, is that where you're building? Is it to the left or
So-
behind the large building that exists?
It's behind the large building.
Okay,
So he's got the driveway, and then he's got some concrete blocks to prevent people from dumping stuff back there. So you drive up to about here, and then you could see there's a grass field where the building's going, and then you can see the parking. But yeah, there's a big building here, and there's a big building there. This is the Bridgewater Chocolate Building.
okay, all right, so,
So it's a rear lot.
okay, I see. Because at the corner that's a pretty steep grade down there. Not,
Over by
if you-
Bridgewater Chocolate.
no, the other way,
Oh, okay.
towards the highway.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, we're not.
And there are also little culverts, little ruts, sort of, for water to run. So how, I guess because you have a sloping driveway coming down, do you know what I mean? They're
I'm trying to think.
asphalt,
So
and
did
they
you-
run into the woods.
So the drainage system has, there's catch basins out in this parking lot,
Mhm.
and they're connected to oil grit separators and underground galleries to store the water.
Okay,
And then they discharge, there's one discharge there, there's another discharge over here, and that handles this parking lot runoff.
Okay.
In the building as well, because they'll just connect into those galleries.
I couldn't tell how steep that grade is.
This is fairly, this is a moderate sloping area.
Okay,
So you can see the wood, this was cleared when I first did this, and this is what's secondary
in.
growth in this area right here.
Mhm.
And then there's still a long area there.
Yes. Thank you.
And all the proposed plantings are native.
Native. Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Timmerman, please.
You said they go into the existing storm water system. Is it an infiltration system or just
It's-
storage?
No, infiltration.
And then just the discharge is when it's too much?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
this area's been known to have a lot of sandy soils, this part of Federal Road and
Yeah.
across the street, so you've got good infiltration.
And where are the existing wetlands aside from the Still River on this?
So, yeah, they're designated by a line with a W in it. And they have a W in a number. So basically, it comes like this, Still River's right here. So it kind of meanders around like this.
Okay. And you said, is it loading only going to be from that little tail there that sticks
Yep,
out?
Yep.
Was there something on the left side of the building as you face it? It looked like almost like a ramp, right there. yeah.
Oh, this is just an overhead door. So this is the loading dock.
Yeah,
That's an overhead door, just to drive up.
all right. And the loading dock's like standard height, sort
Yes,
of thing?
4 foot height, yeah.
Yeah. And so this use, since it used to be a office building, it's gonna be less intense? You
Oh,
only
yes.
have one loading dock
Yeah.
and it's just a
You
warehouse?
won't have the employees like you would at an office building.
Yeah.
Any type of-
And will you even be able to see it from the street? I mean,
Yeah, the mic.
Maybe briefly as you're driving by,
yeah,
but it's not gonna be like the other buildings where they're right along the road.
right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Timmerman. Any other commissioners have any questions? And just
Just-
to reiterate, if I may, sorry,
So
you
is it?
said that you had approval already from wetlands, is that correct? Okay, sorry. Ms.
So it's
Arnett.
just one open 21,000 square foot building?
Correct, yes. No specific tenant at this point. Maybe they have the option if they wanted to break it up into smaller areas, but right now, 21,000 square foot.
Mr. Pratt,
I'm good.
Ms. Holmes, Mr. Lucia, Comer? Well, hearing no further questions, is there anyone who'd like to make a motion as to how to proceed with this application at this time?
I'll make a motion to approve, application Z-23-39, 113 Silver Mine Road, Lot 4.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Pratt seconded Mrs. Holmes' motion. Is there any discussion about the motion? Hearing no discussion, we'll call the vote.
Yes, I have a.
Oh,
I'm
Mrs.
sorry.
Arment, discussion?
When it was approved before, was it approved for this large of a building?
The only difference was, this bump out is a little bit bigger than before, where the loading dock is, so that's the
That's it.
difference, yeah.
Otherwise, it was approved for
Yes,
that.
this rectangle is, the same as before.
And for a warehouse? No.
Before,
I
actually,
think-
they were anticipating an office use, that's why there's the 91 parking spaces.
I see. And it will remain 91?
Yeah, because it's already built. So just, if they wanted to change it to office, they could potentially change it to office down the road, if they wanted to. They'd have to come back for, you know,
Approval.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are those opposed by nay? Are there any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion carries.
Okay,
Thank you
thank you.
very much.
every night.
Next item on the agenda is 8B, 33A Carmen Hill Road, number Z-23-41. Justin Giuliano, proposed barn with 1,120 square feet accessory apartment and 880 square foot garage space. At this time, we can entertain a motion to set the public hearing for August 24th, 2023.
I'd like to make a motion to set public hearing for 33A Carmen Hill Road Z-3341, Justin Giuliani.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Can we
Mr.
correct that? It's 2341 dash.
Yeah.
Oh, just to clarify, Z-23-41 is the motion to set the date for August 24th, 2023, made by Mr. Komar. Do we have a second to the motion?
I'll
Mr.
second.
Pratt?
Oh.
Sorry, Mr. Pratt seconded the motion. Is there any further discussion about the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by nay. Are there any abstentions? The motion carries. This will be set for our next meeting on August 24th. Thank you. Next item, 8C, bond release for 291 Federal Road. We're lucky this evening to have in our attendance the Land Use Director. This is Laura Barkowski. I merely make note of that for our home audience. And also, to correct me if I'm not correct here, but I believe that Mr. Lally, our Land Use Zoning Enforcement Officer, recommended that we make a motion to the Board of Selectmen to release the final bond for the amount of $8,600. And we certainly can discuss it, Mr. Timmerman.
In regards to this application, the original approval back in 2018, there was a bond that was also covered sidewalk construction. So in the special conditions of approval back then, the sidewalk construction will be bonded and its construction will be deferred until the state proceeds with this federal road upgrade, which is happening right now,
Yes.
in the same area, up to 2 years, after which time the sidewalk must be installed. So without that sidewalk there, I don't think we can release the bond. The other thing is, at that point, we thought there was gonna be a sidewalk by the state. But if you look at the the design of the project, there is no sidewalk by the state, so the Linden will have to put in the sidewalk themselves.
Oh,
And so some of this money is indeed for that. Everything else is in place except for that.
well, that's new but helpful information. I'm certainly guessing that our new land use director probably doesn't know the history on this case, so perhaps it would be wise for us as a body to consider tabling this item until the gentleman that made the recommendation comes back and we can further discuss it. Certainly no urgency to this, so
Yeah.
I think we probably should make a motion then, and the chair's happy to accept one, should someone like to make it at this time, to table this item till our next meeting.
I'll make that motion to table item. We already-
Well, it's the bond release for two
Oh, yeah,
ninety-one.
the bond release.
All right, we have a motion to table the issue of the bond release for 291 Federal Road in the amount of $8,600, pending the return of the zoning enforcement officer for our next meeting, which will be August 24th, 2023. Do we have a second to the motion?
Second.
Thank you. Mrs. Holmes has seconded Mr. Komar's motion to table this item. Do we have any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed by nay. Are there any abstentions? Okay, we will table this until August 24th and review it then again. Next item, number 9, tabled items. A, revision of zoning fee schedule, land use director, update.
Oh, wait, point of order, what about 8D? Or is that not on the new agenda?
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. I apologize. I inadvertently checked it off as having been done. But we have the same person, luckily. So I apologize. Item 8D, thank you, Mr. Timmerman, is the appointment of our land use director, Laura Barkowski, as deputy zoning enforcement officer. I think everyone's familiar with the history, how we've had cases before where, just like now, Mr. Lally is not in the office, and we needed to have someone to be able to fill in should he not be here. And we had to do that in kind of a hasty manner about a year ago, and luckily, our new land use director is happy to do so and is already qualified and certified to do so. So unless there's any further discussion, I would be happy as the chair to entertain a motion to appoint our land use director, Laura Barkowski, as deputy zoning enforcement officer.
I make motion to appoint Laura Barkowski as our deputy zoning enforcement officer.
Thank you, Mrs. Holmes. Do we
I'll
have a
second.
second? Mr.
Absolutely.
Pratt seconds that motion. Do we have any discussion about this issue? Not hearing any. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. Are there any abstentions? That motion carries. Congratulations, Land Use Director Barkowski. You are now the Deputy Zoning Enforcement Officer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely.
Add it to my list of job responsibilities.
Just what you wanted.
Probably.
While we have you, now we can go into tabled items number 9A, revision of zoning fee schedule.
So everyone should have a copy of the fee schedule that was included in their packet. It's the wonderful pink sheet that we have here. I know this has been an item that has gone back and forth on
I
what
did
we're going
not.
to do with it, whether or not it was gonna be revised.
I mean, I don't think people have it, but
we got 'em.
please, feel free to go ahead.
That or the PDF about the regs.
It was there a long
Two
time
things
ago.
we're missing.
Then it wasn't.
Then it wasn't.
I'd be happy to give my copy away. Or I can make copies.
That's all we have.
At a later point in time. All right, is everyone familiar with the fee schedule? Have they seen it before?
Yeah.
Is this the old one that you?
This is the old one. There's
Yeah, okay.
absolutely no revisions that have been done to it at this point.
Yeah, sure, so you can go ahead, right? Doesn't matter, that's already in there,
So
so.
there's certain items on this fee schedule that I can't, that I'm hoping that the commission itself can help me identify where they came from, particularly things such as the wood cutting permit fee schedule. And I'm kind of also looking for some feedback from the commission on if it's fees that should be increased, fees that we wanted to decrease, and if we can kind of have a working dialogue on this. I know at one point in time we had discussed talking about site plans or talking about different applications one at a time and kind of going through this. I don't believe this would be something that's just entirely set by staff. I feel like this is the commission's applications because these are the applications that come before you as well. It's not something I just want to or feel comfortable just determining. But there are certain applications on there that I'm not quite sure what they're associated with, and I'm hoping, maybe Mr. Timmer, you could assist me.
Sure. I'll try.
Specifically down at the bottom, the woodworking,
The wood cutting permit,
Mhm.
I see that.
450. Pretty high.
Pretty good deal.
Also, I don't see the accrual of fees for the daily, fine. We discussed that as a commission many meetings ago. I don't know what
Where
the
is it?
consensus was for increasing daily fine. Didn't we have that?
Yeah, I think we're working, we're working on that too, but that's sort of part of this, but this is more fees for applications, right?
Okay, and then we
And then fines
discussed,
is another thing, but I think that, our new land use director has a recommendation about that as well, but maybe she can go to that after this, but
And-
if I may, while I'm yammering on here, another thought would be to kind of try to make things more uniform, because there's a lot of disparity here, but we're revisiting this, we kind of tabled it many times, and now we have a new person here with a lot of expertise and energy, so I think we'll make progress. But I think you're basically like restarting here,
I
so
would like
just,
to restart this.
so
I
we
would-
should have the conversation once again with you, probably,
I
like,
would
just
prefer
have
that,
it now.
just to have an
Yeah.
idea,
Okay.
and if it wasn't included in your
have one.
packet, I don't wanna
Thank you.
blindside anyone with this conversation as
Thank you.
well. I just know when I was looking at it, trying to coordinate
Oh, thanks.
what even some of these things were and what you considered, it was a little confusing to me. You've been sitting with your zoning regulations since 2018. I just met them, a couple months ago, so.
Well, in regards to the wood cutting, and actually with a lot of it, we never see that side of it, cause it comes through land use. But I have to say, as far as wood cutting goes, I don't know if I've ever seen an application come in front of us. We have people come and say, wood cutting is allowed in certain things. I wonder if they're actually, like, for example, down, in Vale Road,
Right.
we had an application. And I guess they would be paying that permit, but then I don't know if there's any definition in the regs for what wood cutting is.
How much they
You
can
know, is
cut,
it
yeah.
splitting, cutting them into lengths? So,
Was it
taking
longer?
these and mapping them to our regs might be what you're trying to do, and that's the first step.
Okay.
And then work backwards from there. So I can go through some of these and, know what I know and see what section they refer to, and then hand that, and give that back to you, or give it back to the commission, we can start working on that.
That would be extremely helpful to me, if that's
Yeah.
okay with the commission, Mr. Chair. Any kind of input is much appreciated.
so maybe we can look at this like we're restarting it with a fresh set of eyes, and, we'll proceed, stay on it.
There are also different ways in which to do fee schedules, as I'm just throwing it out there. There's other flat fees, certain other towns charge by type, like a regulation could just be a flat fee all the way across. So site plan applications could be one flat fee, an amendment to a site plan application could be another, instead of based off of acreage or based off of commercial, based off of residential. It's all dependent. There's plenty of different ways to approach this.
Yeah.
And I could be happy to provide you with samples of other fee schedules that are different from your own.
Please do.
I think that would be helpful.
Please do.
That just to kind of have a low comparison basis.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One conversation we absolutely had, because I remember it, was about the public hearing fee for 550. Because oftentimes we get just like, regular people, regular homeowners with a small, residential application for like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
And it wasn't
accessory
really fair.
apartment.
Yes, or
And
in-law
commercial was
apartment, or just
slightly
something, I
bigger
don't know,
shed.
some modification
Yeah.
to the home that's, a rate. 550 seems hefty, but if it's a big developer with like a huge warehouse and, you know what I mean? So we definitely all agreed, I believe, that night, that needed to be looked at and talked about, 550 for everybody, so we wanted to change that one.
Good point.
And to your point, cause some of these are like accessory apartments, what's the ZBA schedule? Cause there should be some sort of consistency between the two.
That's a good point, too.
Everything is a public hearing in ZBA, but they have their mix of sheds, variances for sheds and commercial things, and, just like we have differences between residential and commercial, so do they.
It's always a good idea that we be consistent throughout, and
Yeah.
sometimes
It
we
is.
fall short of that.
And at one time on the commission, didn't we waive a fee for a church?
Hmm.
We did.
Like for a
It was
nonprofit.
voted on. And I've
I
been
think
thinking
someone
about
else did that, actually.
Someone else.
Didn't
I
the
think
first
that was-
selectman try to do it or something? I mean, I don't know.
Oh,
I
you know
think
what?
we
I
did it
think you're
too.
Right, for the St. Joe's.
Yeah, I'm
But
not.
if we're gonna do it,
recalling.
I thought about this a lot. I think we did it one night because we voted and I voted against it, and everybody else voted to like let them out of it. But I thought about it. If we do that for one church, we need to do it
Right.
for everybody.
We always need to worry about
then it's
setting
like-
precedent.
Right. And then I was like, oh, like, you know what I mean? I thought about that. So either we should maybe give every religious organization maybe the free pass on there, if
Or-
they're a charitable organization,
Right.
maybe they just don't have to pay the fee schedule.
The other thing that we commonly did, at least with the ZBA, if for some reason you had to withdraw, for a defect in the application or something, and you reapplied, we would waive the fee because a lot of the work was.
That's nice.
done.
That's nice.
To be
Makes
fair.
sense, though.
I like that. Is that written down on the books right now? We
No.
waive the fee?
I mean,
That's not-
not the reasons, but that's typically the reason we used, just to give them a break, because they were already here once, and usually it was a homeowner, residential, it wasn't,
Yeah.
Right.
commercial.
I could see that's a good idea, except if it becomes a case of people don't do their proper work.
Yeah.
They send it to us, we fix it for them, and then they don't have to pay for it.
Yes, yes.
But it's still the right way to approach it. We want to be fair, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And then, so, Mr. Getz, so
Yes.
we were also just talking about the daily fees. So when will we revisit
Fines,
that?
you
Yeah,
mean?
the daily fines, because we
Well-
don't have, we had it on our books, but we didn't ever have it actively
Yes.
working for us. And that is still not the case, right?
Well, I think that it's being looked at right now. Laura
By-
may know more about
Right.
this than I do, but I also think the attorney's involved, and there's a process being set up to kind of get this addressed with the Board of Selectmen, which is where I think it needs to go. And then, I may be mistaken, but I think because of it, it also needs to have a public hearing.
Correct. It is.
Wow.
It is the zoning citation itself, it's a chapter within the town codes, it's an ordinance. It's not a zoning regulation, so it is separate from your fee schedule. It is a totally separate, it's actually chapter 84, in the code. And it's a totally separate ordinance. It is scheduled to go on the next Board of Selectmen meeting to set a public hearing date for it, so you're hearing it here first. But the draft copy and the idea and the marching orders I was given was to accrue the daily fines, and the revisions are worded, or proposed revisions are worded as such, for a daily fine in the amount of $150 per day, in addition to a few other housekeeping changes that needed to be made. I'd be happy to provide a copy of the ordinance, along to
Thank
the
you.
commission, with the proposed draft and the changes. And it's just been a work in progress currently. I have a CC going to the chairman of the zoning commission as soon as it's 100% finalized. But I have heard that I'm on the agenda for the upcoming meeting, just to set the public hearing date though.
Good.
So,
So it's moving forward.
it is moving
That's what
forward.
I wanted to know. Okay.
It's been one of my number one priorities since I've been here.
And thank you for that. And that would probably be the first Monday in August, which would be like the 7th
It
then?
is the 7th,
Okay,
correct.
thank you. That'll be the Board of Selectmen's meeting, where it should be addressed. Thank you for that. Making a lot of progress.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, thank you.
Good work. Good work.
Thank you.
Is there anything else for item number 9? Does anyone have any further comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll move on to number 10, Commissioner comments and informal discussion. I don't know if everyone else got the update, but we got a kind of late addition. Item A, 854 Federal Road, informal workshop regarding a proposed apartment development. And I think this was also an informal discussion at our last month's meeting as well. So we're gonna do this again, I guess, and this is informal and non-binding, so if the party is here, could they please state their name and address and proceed with what they'd like to talk about?
Yes, thank you. So hi, everybody. My name is Emily Mitchell. I'm Vice President with AR Development Company. I'm here with my attorney, Bill Sweeney, who's also on Zoom. My address is 310 Seven Fields Boulevard, Suite 350, Seven Fields, PA 16046.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Thank you for having us tonight to continue our informal discussion on 854 Federal Road. Really appreciate the opportunity to discuss it with you, and appreciate you allowing us to be on Zoom as well. So thank you for that. When we met last month, we went over our conceptual plan for 854 Federal Road. So this is a 3.75 acre parcel that's the southern portion of the previously approved Enclave project. So we went through our conceptual plan, which is 51 market rate apartment units, and then we talked a little bit about the underlying zoning and the amendments that we would need in order to move the project forward. So I know you all had several questions at that meeting. Some of those questions were around how does this project, what we're proposing, compare to the previously approved Enclave project? So I can walk you through that a little bit. And then I think we also discussed about how we could potentially propose a text amendment which would allow us to be very targeted in what it would affect, as opposed to, you know, affecting the entire town center district. So Bill has proposed some things around that, and we can talk about that tonight as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen, if that's okay.
If I may, my name's Gary Getz. I wasn't at the last meeting, but I seem to recall from the minutes that there was supposed to be some proposal that was gonna be created. Is that correct?
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, this is Bill Sweeney. I'm the attorney for AR Building. We had put together a draft. I had provided a copy to Fran and Laura earlier today. I don't know if you were able to get a copy of that, but we provided a copy of it. But if you didn't get it in paper form, we'll put the proposal up on the screen and make sure that you have a copy going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other questions, or do you want us to go ahead and go through this presentation?
Yeah, my only question is, how long is this going to take?
I'll be very brief.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So this is our site. I think most of you are familiar with it. As I mentioned, it's at 850 Federal Road. It's 3.75 acres. It's actually right across the street from our 100-unit development that we have under construction right now. So go to the next slide. This is the previously approved Enclave project. So the area outlined in red is actually where we have a purchase and sales agreement to move forward with our project. And then the whole area outlined in black was the entire Enclave project. So the full Enclave project was 187 units in 9.18 acres. But the part that we're going to be redeveloping was about 3.75 acres, and it had about 55 units on that previously approved project. This is our site plan, which we talked about last month. So what we are proposing is a single 4-story elevated building with 51 market rate apartment units. And what this allows us to do is, by having one building, this really reduces our impervious footprint. It allows us to bring that 4-story building back from the street, and it also allows us to minimize our impacts on the wetlands currently on the site. Our proposal, we have to do some more engineering, of course, would be not to directly impact those wetlands. And then these gray buildings here are what we are currently building across the street. Those are those 100-unit apartment building. And we're proposing a connection across the street because our residents here would use the amenities that we're already building in the project across the street. And then I just put together this chart here to kind of highlight some of the differences between the previously approved Enclave project and what we're proposing. So some of these things kind of tie back into what we're going to be amending for our zoning, what we'll be asking to amend for our zoning. So on the Enclave project, they actually proposed 3 buildings. on the site, whereas we're proposing one building. They're proposing a mix of both commercial apartments and a clubhouse, where we're proposing only apartments. The max footprint of the building on this site was about 14,500 square feet, and we're proposing 16,500 square feet. This really allows us to get our unit count within that one building. They were building right up to the road, and they did have a commercial retail component of that, so they were 25-foot setback. We're proposing that we're actually back 320 feet from the road. Their previous approved project had 4 stories, as are we proposing. Their density was a little higher. They had 55 units, so they were at 14.6 units per acre, where we're proposing 13.6, where we'll probably round it up to 14. They had smaller buildings, so their max buildings, units per building were 36, whereas we're proposing 51. Because of their retail and their clubhouse, they did have a lot more parking within their proposed development. They had 129 spaces, whereas we're proposing 84 spaces, which is about 1.6 spaces per unit. So that really allows us to reduce our impervious surfaces. They did have a commercial clubhouse. Their impervious coverage was about 76,000 square feet, whereas we're only at 56,785. And then finally, the previously proposed project was directly impacting wetlands. They proposed that they would fill it in. About 2,300 square feet of that. Within our proposed concept, we would not directly impact those wetlands. So that's just a high-level overview of what was previously approved back in 2016. I know you had some questions about that last month, so I wanted to go over that. But we can... And then I can turn it over to Bill, and he can talk about what we're proposing in terms of the zoning amendment.
So, and I know there was some of you that were not there last month, so I'll try to be brief, but I also want to make sure everyone understands our approach. So what we're looking for is, and what we talked about last month, was some changes that I called narrowly tailored or targeted changes to the TCD Town Center District that would allow our concept project to move forward, but as we discussed last month would not completely unravel sort of the zoning bulk and dimensional requirements for the entire zone. So at first, we wanted to first identify what were the points of contention, or where did we have issues with the existing TCD zoning, and identify those, and then find a way to sort of address those in a very surgical manner. So they were, last month when we were before you, we actually had 7 different items, although as we've developed our concept, we actually were able to remove one altogether. But we have a conflict with our footprint max, a maximum. The TCD has a 12,000, we have a 16.5. You may note that the Enclave was above 12,000. That's because the Enclave used the 830G process through affordable housing, which we're not taking advantage of. This is a market rate project. We have there's a 25-foot maximum front yard setback. We don't have that. We would be not applicable for this project because we're shifting our single-use residential building back the 300 feet that's required by your regulations. There's no mixed-use component. The maximum height for the TCD standard is 3 stories or 42 feet. We would seek 4 stories or 50 feet. The density is 8 units an acre. We're looking at 14 units an acre, still less than what the Enclave project proposes. And then obviously we have a larger building, so we have more units. We've got 51 units for a building. The only other item that seems to be in conflict with the concept plan is the requirement for 2 independent means of egress, unless prohibited due to site constraints. And really what we're looking to do is to try to allow for some flexibility there, because our site has limited frontage, and we're also trying to line up our site with the project across the way, and really allow for a curb cut that will work with the streetscape improvements that I know the town has money for. We've been working closely with your economic development coordinator on that. So I apologize if you didn't get a copy of my proposal, but if I can, if you could stop sharing, Emily, I'll put my proposal on the screen. And I certainly, Fran and Laura should have a copy of this. and we can make sure that you get it after this meeting. Certainly, what we really wanted to do, I hope everybody can see that, was to just give you an idea on an approach that we had talked, and I think a couple members last month made it clear that, you know, they were open to a continued discussion about this, but they didn't want to undo all the bulk and dimensional requirements for the TCD. So one of the parts of the TCD that we sort of focused on was sort of the inherent design flexibility provisions under Section J of the Town Center District. And what we were considered was an additional design flexibility provision. Right now there's 5 that give some leeway to developers and property owners in developing their parcels. And what we're proposing here is something, again, sort of surgical, something narrowly tailored. And it would be basically a design flexibility provision that would target the development of vacant constrained lots. And so what it says is for lots within the TCD which are vacant as of July 1, 2023, so July 1 of this month, include frontage on federal road, so they have to have actual frontage on federal road, and encompass environmental constraints such as inland wetlands or other natural resources which limit opportunities for practical and conforming development, the Commission may approve, subject to a special permit, development with the following flexibility to typical bulk and dimensional requirements. And as you go down, you'll see where the flexibility is exactly targeted at the 6 items where we need some relief to allow this project to move forward. We allow an increased building footprint, a maximum front yard setback is no longer applicable, the maximum height goes up to 4 stories and 50 feet, the residential density is increased to 14 dwelling units an acre, and the maximum number of dwelling units per structure is 51, and then the number of independent means of access is decreased to 1. Now, what the idea here is that only a subset of all the lots in the TCD zone would be eligible. Right now, there is less than a half a dozen lots on Federal Road, with frontage on Federal Road, that are actually vacant. So of all those lots, there's only a half a dozen lots. Most of them have some serious development constraints and would preclude their development. Our project, our site at 854 would certainly qualify. It was vacant as of July 1. It is on Federal Road, and it certainly has environmental constraints with inland wetlands. I think this regulation is not specific to our site, but I see there's probably at least 2 other sites at the southern end of the zone, probably 701 and 731 Federal Road. Both of those lots have sufficient size and depth to provide it to fall and to be eligible under this section. So it's not a regulation just for us, but it would still be very limited to a small subset of the TCD zone. Not every property in the TCD zone would be subject to this, and really you start with a very small population of vacant lots, and then vacant lots that have these constraints and have the frontage that would make them eligible. And again, we still would control this through the special permit process, so the Commission, on a case-by-case basis, based on the circumstances of the proposal, can look at each project on its own merits and determine whether or not that makes sense under your special permit criteria. But this type of a design flexibility provision would give us the ability to take this lot on the southern end of the Enclave parcel project and put it into productive reuse and really make it an extension of the project that's going on across the street. So I wanted to present this to you as, and again, I know you haven't seen this, you haven't reviewed it, but I wanted to sort of present it to you as a possible approach. And certainly we'd be open if there were concerns or other items that you think that we need to consider. But this would be our initial sort of proposal of something like this to come before the Commission if there was a willingness and if the Commission felt this was an appropriate way to proceed.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Timmerman.
That's an interesting tack you took. I like it, I guess. And I like that you've done the homework to find out whether lots are in the area. One area, the maximum height, something we've done similar to, I guess it's our Gateway North. is we allowed 4 stories, and I think it was 50 feet or something, but the setback had to be a certain distance from the road. So the tallness of any higher, taller building wouldn't be imposing. And of course, your proposal kind of pushes the building back, you know, by 300 feet. So that
Right.
apparent height of 50 feet is not as imposing as if it was right on the road, which is, you know, why we kept it down to 42 feet at 25 feet setback in the middle. So I guess maybe maximum height given a certain setback, you know, that sort of thing.
That's an excellent point, and certainly that's the kind of, you know, constructive comment that we could work in. You know, certainly you have regulations right now in the TCD that basically says if you're doing a standalone residential building, you must be set back 300 feet. We're set back 300 feet, but I can absolutely understand why you wouldn't want somebody to do a mixed-use building, for example, that's 4 stories tall on the roadway. So we could absolutely modify dimensional requirement C to say 4 stories and 50 feet, provided that you are at least 300 feet back from Federal Road. And I think that would achieve the purpose that you're discussing.
Yep. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other commissioners have any comments or questions for the informal workshop?
Oh,
Mr. Timmerman,
sorry,
please.
I did remember something. I printed it out, but of course it's on my printer at home. I happened to get the original enclave because they settled. It was an incentive housing, affordable housing thing, way back in 2016 in September. So there is one building there. It's 4 stories tall, and it's like 47 and a half feet. So similar to what they're talking about here. At least this building is set back. Their proposal is to set the building back, which I'd rather see than something close to the road. So just to give you an idea, they gave you some other specs on density and everything else, but as far as the buildings go, that was the sort of building that was in the Enclave project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Arment?
Yes,
Saw you
so
first, sorry.
I just want to be clear, you're building 100 units across the street? Am I wrong?
That's correct.
You know where the barnyard was? The
Pardon?
barnyard that sold sheds and stuff?
Yes,
So that's going to be a 2 buildings that hold 100 apartments right there.
100 market,
Yeah, market rate.
market. So there's a
Ooh,
100.
There's actually,
Oh, actually, I'm sorry.
small amount. There's actually a small amount of affordable in that project, not by our choice, but that was a legacy project as well. That was the Green Acres development, and that was an appeal as well, just like the Enclave. And we took that project over and modified it. So there is a small affordable component there, but the vast majority, you wouldn't be able to tell what units are affordable. It is our market rate unit. We just can't charge the same amount for those units, for that small collection of units.
So there are 100 there, there are 51 across the street. There are how many down at Four Corners? And then the new building that just went up, where Laurel Hill comes in. And then we have all those on Laurel Hill. And then another 50-something in the, is it,
The
where
food
the
emporium?
blight
By Station
building.
Road, Station Road,
Yeah,
over there.
yeah,
That's right, they're building them now.
yeah.
They're
So
they're under construction.
how do we accommodate all this as far as our little town?
In terms of what?
In terms of sewage, in terms of education, in terms of,
Well, I have to say a comment because the school children generated by these apartments, I think people don't understand that the school-age population is not going up that fast. And some, like New Milford, is actually going down to the point where they actually have to close schools because they don't have enough people in the school system anymore. So we don't want to keep anybody from coming here. It would be a death spiral. We have fewer people, you know, so it's not as bad as you think, or as people, I understand, we don't want so many kids coming in, but every unit also brings in tax revenue. You know, though the people who rent them don't pay taxes, their rent goes to paying taxes for the people who actually own the buildings. So, but it's always good to ask for that sort of impact analysis. How many school children is it gonna be?
So one thing, one thing, if I could add something to that comment, because I completely agree with the comment just made. If you look across the state of Connecticut, school populations are going down in almost every community. So you actually have schools that taxpayers have paid for capital, where you have empty chairs, and that's actually a waste of infrastructure resources. But more importantly, I think this is a point, and I know Laura can probably echo some of these comments, because I know she has the sort of the same training I have. I was a planner before I was an attorney. But multifamily apartment units do not generate school-age children at the rates that single families do. Rutgers University in New Jersey has been doing longitudinal studies. It's called Residential Demographic Multiplier Study, that they've been doing for almost 20 years. And they've tracked in every state in the country population demographic information on different types of housing development. And they've done it here for the state of Connecticut and all counties in Connecticut. And I can tell you with great confidence that 20 years of studies have shown that single-family housing in Connecticut generates somewhere in the vicinity of 1.6 school-age children per unit, so per house. But multifamily housing, particularly multifamily housing that's market rate and is 1 or 2 bedrooms, which is what AR Building builds, generates approximately 0.2 of a child per unit. So you need 5 units to get a single child in those projects. And in reality, AR has a number of projects throughout the state of Connecticut, throughout Rhode Island. What we're seeing in AR projects is substantially less than that. The occupants in our buildings are young, transient, upwardly mobile individuals, and quite frankly, a lot of seniors who are looking to downsize, don't want to take care of their properties anymore, mowing lawn and shoveling snow, but they want to stay in the communities that they grew up in and raised children in. And so there is a demographic shift in our country away from single-family housing to multifamily housing, and there just isn't the supply that the actual demand that there is. So I think the issue of school-age children is really not an issue when it comes to multifamily development, particularly the type of multifamily development that my client does all over this state.
All right,
Any
thank
other-
you. Let's
Starman?
take out that issue of children and go to the issue of, because I'm a building owner in New York City, the onus does fall on the owner. The tenants are tenants. They don't have a stake in the property. So if we have hundreds of, in a small town, of renters rather than owners, you're cutting out your tax base there, and they don't have a stake in it.
You're not cutting out your
They
tax
have to pay
base.
taxes.
The owner, the
I'm saying the
building,
owner of the building, and I understand that very well.
but you're not cutting out a tax base.
Well,
You're still paying
if
the
you
same
had,
tax.
if you had people who owned condos as opposed to renting 1 or 2 bedroom,
Yeah.
and I understand people want to downsize. I was just talking about the other day to my husband. But if they were to purchase rather than to rent, they have a stake in the community. If we have, I'm seeing so many apartments being built here, and they're rentals, they're not condos. So this is my concern
Just a question.
in our little town.
That's a good. How do
Please.
you know they're upwardly mobile individuals? Like you said that as a
Yeah.
blanket statement, Mr. Sweeney, and that was like, to me, an odd comment. How are you sure that that's,
Yeah,
I
sure.
mean,
So
and what does
a
that
lot
mean
of-
to you? Can you define what you, I mean,
a lot of our tenants are young professionals who are living together as couples or are newly married. They typically both have jobs. Our units are not cheap. They're not subsidized. They're not affordable unless they have to be by town's regulations. So the people that we have living in our complexes are exactly the type of people that you want to move into your community. And when they want to have children, they typically then look for single family homes, and then they move into those areas of your town. So I think that was sort of the intention of my comment. I think one thing I would point out too, and it's specific to my client, and we talked about it a little bit last time, that I would just remind the commission is, and we did this when we got the approvals from you for the project across the street, is AR Building's a little bit different than other developers in that they're vertically integrated. So when I say that, what that means is there is a development division that Emily works at who goes from town to town to locate sites, get permits, and get projects approved. They have their own construction company within AR, which will actually build the project. So the project across the street is AR building it. And then they have a management arm of the company that actually holds and manages it. The AR is not a company that builds projects and flips them to other developers. They hold them in their portfolio. It's a company that's been around for over 50 years, and in that 50 years, they may have sold, 1,000 units. And they own thousands and thousands of units throughout the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast, and now in other parts of the country as well. So they have a incentive to build good buildings from the start that will last the test of time, that they can properly maintain, and they have a vested interest in making sure the tenants that they choose and they screen are the best tenants possible, because this is their asset that they're holding in their portfolio. So it's a different type of development than a lot of other multifamily developers. I think the towns that we've developed in Connecticut, we have a really good reputation because our facilities are kept at a different level than perhaps other apartment facilities in those communities.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from any other commissioners or any comments at this time?
I got one.
Yes, Mr. Pratt.
All right. Have you guys, at this point, have you done any traffic studies for that area with 51 units being built?
Yeah, so we did a traffic study as part of the project across the street.
Yeah, I know that.
So we did a traffic analysis there, which showed that that we had significant capacity available in Federal Road, and that project had no adverse impacts to any of the adjacent or nearby intersections. Our plan is to develop our access point in conjunction with the project across the street and to have that pedestrian connection. So, if and when we get to a point where we're eligible to apply, because right now the concept plan we have does not meet your zoning. But if a regulation similar to what we're proposing tonight is adopted, we would then move forward with an actual application for the development, and a traffic study would be part of that, where we would update what we did across the street with the additional 51 units. But based on my review of the work we did across the street, there's no question that there's adequate capacity within Federal Road, and there's adequate capacity in the nearby intersections for what would be a very small amount of traffic. 51 units is literally what I would call a small project. It's probably the smallest project that AR does. We typically don't do anything smaller than 51 units.
Well, that's about 100 new cars, just, ballpark, right? So on that Federal Road. There's also some other developments being built that we've already
Yes.
approved down at the end of
Yeah.
Federal Road. So all
Yes.
that's gonna add up. It's gonna be a lot of traffic.
Yeah.
So that has
Hundreds
to be
of
included
cars,
in your
hundreds.
study. Your study was done when on the building you're doing now? When was that done?
I think we got our
2016?
approvals in 2021. But a traffic study can't just be done in a vacuum. So one of the parts of a traffic study is to look at projects that are under construction in the adjacency of your project, plus talking to the town to get all projects that have been approved as well. So, you know, a properly done traffic study will include all of that, and they will work that into their background traffic numbers.
Right.
And that's certainly the kind of study that we would do, would absolutely take into account other projects and things that are going on in the area, including potential changes to the roadway or new public infrastructure projects. All that stuff has to be considered, and it has to be done in a timely fashion. It has to be done when you're actually going for your permits.
Right.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you, Mr. Sweeney.
One of the,
At this,
oh,
do you have
just-
another
just-
question? I
just
don't
wanna-
want to intrude,
Yeah, sorry, but one other thing, you know, just to comment on Gwen's statement, it's not just schools that's gonna be impacted, it's our police force, it's our fire department, which is volunteer at this point. At what point do we have to have a paid fire department and increase our police staff that's already going? I live on on Wisconsin Road. I've never heard so many sirens since I've been here in the past few years. I've been here 14 years, and the amount of traffic, the amount of sirens, that means that our utilities are being, you know, exercised quite often. So we're gonna have to expand those. And those are things that we have to consider as a small town to you know,
Thanks
that's
for your
gonna cost us in taxes and everything
Good
else.
thoughts.
And when you say ownership, they're not ownership. These people are transient. Like you said, they're gonna come, they're gonna stay a couple years. Maybe they move out of this unit. They don't have any ownership, so they don't have any value to them. And I think I stated that to you last time you were here in
Yeah.
front of us. It's just, without ownership, what do you care that what happens to the town or what you do to the town if you're not invested in it? So, and again, it's a little town, Brookfield, but all of a sudden we've grown in the last 14 years. We're turning into Danbury, we're turning into New Milford. I don't know if that's the course of what Brookfield wants at this point, but, you know, that's to be determined,
Well,
I guess.
If I may, now that we've already spent a half hour on this, I was only gonna ask, because I wasn't at the initial workshop last meeting, what is it you're looking to get from this commission by doing these workshops?
We were looking for informal buy-in into an approach for a text amendment, similar to what I have put up on the screen. If the commission had no willingness to contemplate or consider this, we would have to look elsewhere and look at other opportunities. Like I said before, the design that we put forward does not work under your current regulations.
Yeah.
And so we had come to see, would you be open to maybe potentially making changes? And then we got feedback at the last meeting. I think Mr. Timmerman was sort of out front on this, said basically, yes, we would be open to listening more and having a further discussion, but we really wanted you to narrowly tailor it so it doesn't affect the whole district. I think that was the intent of this, you know, and certainly if you think that we're on the in the right direction, we would then move toward an actual text amendment application to your zoning. If you feel we're in the wrong direction or we're missing something, or this is something that you wouldn't want to entertain, or you want some substantial changes to what we're proposing, it would be really helpful for us to hear that now so that we can make decisions and also potentially modify what we've proposed to make it more acceptable to the commission. Again, this is a non-binding workshop, but
Right.
the idea is we're supposed to have a dialogue.
So it's non-binding, that means anything we express, we could change our minds later on, right?
Correct.
Doesn't mean that we have to do it. And wouldn't a lot of this discussion take place after you file an application? Because
It
then we know
would.
what you're actually proposing. This is all theoretical pie in the sky, if I may, at this point.
It's all theoretical. I've been doing this for 20 years, as I said before, as a planner and now a zoning attorney. My experience is I've had better success working with commissions informally before a formal application, because if there are issues that I've missed or issues that are important to a community that I don't know about, I'd like to hear that before I make a formal submission so I can try to address it in advance. And so that was the purpose of doing this
okay.
informally.
Thank you.
And Mr.
Mr.
Chairman, I
Tillman.
think it's for us next time to look at these and discuss, you know, is this a direction, or are we comfortable with this or not, or any changes? And then we can feed it back to AR Builder.
Thank you. Do we get to bill you for this time?
At our normal rate, $0 an hour?
Well, we normally don't provide counseling service.
If it's $0 an hour, feel free to send the invoice directly to me.
Thank you. Any other questions from the commissioners? Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for the time. We appreciate it. It's your courtesy in letting us do it remotely is really appreciated. Both of us are sort of distant from Brookfield, and it's nice to be able to do it virtually. So again, thanks for that.
You're welcome. Pleasure to have you.
Everyone.
All right.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on in the agenda to item number 11, adjournment.
We got to start your next meeting.
The next regular meeting is August 24th, 2023. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I
make
make motion to adjourn.
Mr. Komar made a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Mrs. Holmes seconded the motion.
Oh, no, Arment.
I'm sorry.
You got one of them.
I apologize. Ms. Arment seconded the motion. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. Anyone abstaining? The motion carries. Thank you. See you next time.
I will not be here on the 24th.
Well, I just felt like the gentleman was like kind of monologuing, though, you know, like chewing up too much time. If you ask him a simple question, it goes on for 15 minutes.
Yeah, he is being paid by the hour.
We've seen that before.
Yes, indeed.
It was like, so did you do?